After Jerry died, the cops wouldn't stop harassing me. They couldn't prove anything. They actually thought that I killed him. Anyways, San Francisco got to be a really bad trip after you left. And that's when I remembered you had that extra apartment.
Hey. Hi, I'm Trish.
Hi, Trish.
Well, what do men want?
Just a pretty woman to love and to take care of them. Love me. Love me. What I'm really interested in is love. You might say I'm addicted to love. You want to take a girl up there now? You want some?
What is it?
Well, I met this great-looking guy, and I used love magic on him. Then he got really weird on me. All these emotions started flowing out of him. Then he got really sick. What is it, Wayne? What is it, baby? What a pussy. What a baby. Wayne. Witchcraft is just a way of concentrating energy. You can only work with what's already there. I just use sex magic to create love magic. Sometimes it's almost scary how strong the love gets.
And sex magic, of course.
I would do anything for love.
Hello, welcome. Tonight, on this episode of The Night Shift, we have a very special guest. It is the amazing Anna Biller, filmmaker, director, writer, just amazing woman all around. And we're talking about, firstly, The Love Witch, her 2016 film that all three of us absolutely adore, which was one of the main reasons why we wanted to have you on. The film, I rewatched it again this morning for, I don't know, the umpteenth time. And this time I found it even more hilarious, I think, than the first. I mean, it's so funny, but I found it this time even more funny. I think just things kick in a lot later. And so it was very enjoyable this time around, even more so. For those who haven't seen the film, well, we're talking about it. So, join in. And I hope this inspires you to come and watch the film as well. Because it's an amazing, fun film. Whether you're talking about the film itself and the themes in the film, or just the way it's shot, the amazing way that it's lit and constructed, and just the way you've managed to mirror something that's from the 1960s, very Technicolor type film. And also I love the kind of, for me, it was really like Liz Taylor sort of vibes, like all of the speech and then the mannerisms and the behavior. I love that. And kind of just sitting there watching it again today, there's almost that old English as well, that kind of like really in there as well, which I really like. And of course, we love witches on this show. We love femme fatales, all of the above. So, this is just the perfect film for us to come together and talk on. So we are so honored and happy to have you actually here with us to talk about it. We've been really privileged to have a lot of amazing women on this show, and now it's so good to be able to add you to that list. So.
Yay.
Hey.
You forgot one thing, Renee. We also love movies that have menstrual blood in them. Or
Well, we do. Yes, we normally always say that. Yes, you're right. Yes, 100%. We have a lot of blood and a lot of goop in a lot of the movies we choose.
No, I will say with this movie, I feel like this probably was the most interesting use of menstrual blood and tampon specific things, and also pointing out very specifically that most men have not seen a tampon outside of a box, probably, unless they are really good boyfriends or a brother or a dad, because most of the time they stay clear of that aisle in the CVS. So it was nice that that was like a nice little shout out to that.
Yeah, and I wanted to make sure, the reason I had her do that little voiceover about how tampons aren't gross is I just wanted to make sure that people understood that this isn't about using blood as horror. You know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
blood is not horror. This is like blood in movies is horrific, but this is something different. This is like her part of her feminine magic. It's not part of the horror. You know, it's horrifying when the cop is going around town just sort of showing it to everyone, but it's you know.
It has a deeper purpose, which is amazing.
Yeah, it's part of her body that she's giving to the earth and that she's giving to her dead lover as a kind of an offering. You know, so yeah. So like a lot of things in the movie were, you know, I'm trying to subvert expectations of, you know, just cliches in horror, you know, cliches about what's supposed to be scary. You know, like the femme fatale, for example, is usually like a really evil character. So I really wanted to make her sympathetic.
Yeah, she doesn't seem like a villain. That's the thing I love about this movie is she does kill people, but with love. Like it's by accident. Like, you know what I mean? Like I feel like she's not this evil, witchy person. She just wants to find love. It's kind of, I view it as my favorite rom-com instead of horror because it does feel like a romance more than, it just feels like she hasn't got the potion quite right, you know, or she hasn't.
Yeah, her potion's a little too strong. Yeah, she hasn't got this right.
Yeah, this is like dating. She's basically like, this is a movie about dating with a witch involved, but she wants love. She does want to find love, and she is doing things that I think, oddly, a lot of self-help books do suggest, which is give them what they want or be to whatever, which is kind of old school dating advice. But when she presents it, it sounds like it makes sense. She just doesn't mean to kill them. They just sort of get over emotional with how great she is.
Yeah, because they have to feel their feelings, and that's what kills them. But it's a little bit of a joke about how it is when you are in a relationship and you're seeing a guy and you start to get serious, and they start to actually kind of love you, and how it scares them half to death, and how they kind of act like they're dying. Like that you could do really great things for them and be really great and even be like really great in bed and really great cooking for them and doing everything for them. And rather than just being like happy with it, like sometimes it just completely spooks them out and they need to get away. You know how they act like you're actually killing them when you're loving them?
Yeah.
That's kind of the basis for this movie in a way, just this feeling about how, like, I read this book about, it was written by a man, and it was about trying to tell women that that they need to kind of lay off with that stuff. Like when you're giving too much, it's like a kind of toxic. It's like a kind of a poison because men can't give as much as you, and it's kind of like you become like extremely toxic with your love. I thought that was so hilarious, actually. You know, I thought that's the whole basis for like what you could do with that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the scene, the first scene, like I was literally just in tears laughing because I just hadn't seen it in a while, and then you know I was rewatching it, and just the first character that she actually poisons, but like I was just like laughing hysterically with how he was just she's like, he's such a pussy, and just like how he was just like going nuts with like, and but it was funny because part of me just felt like I am so seen right now. Like it was like so many of my female friends, I've seen them like that, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, and I've definitely probably at one point in my life done that myself, like 100%. So but just watching it was really funny, it being, the roles being reversed, and kind of seeing that, and seeing the way that, because if a guy did that to me in real life, like I would react the same way. I'd be like pretty mortified.
I mean, but men are extremely emotional in relationships, and it's not just anger. They cry and they scream, and they're just so emotional. And it's like it's behind closed doors, and nobody ever sees it. Other men don't see it because they see men just being so strong in all the movies and TV. They don't. It's only like your lover that sees that side of you, and then men are kind of unaware of it in themselves. Like they aren't representations of their vulnerability and their tears and their crying. I started trying to find a lot of movies of men crying, like the ones that I could find. It was really interesting because it doesn't happen that often. It's usually really powerful in movies when men cry,
Oh yeah. I mean, I have memories of just like seeing. It's only happened a couple of times in my life, but where I've seen like my father cry, and it was like, it's crushing. Like
male tears. It's just just you can feel it. Yeah.
Or movies will use it as like a comedy thing, like Bedazzled, I think was a good example of that. The remake of Bedazzled, where he's trying to be the perfect man for this woman that he can't seem to attract. And in one case, he's like, well, I'll just be more emotional. She wants me to be more emotional. And he ends up like crying. His new version of him is him crying at everything, writing really sappy poetry, really turning her off because everything makes him cry. Everything makes him emotional. And it goes over the top. And that's why I love this movie so much, because it's kind of, it doesn't make fun of it, but it does show, this is a side that we never see in movies. So it is a little like strange to see it, but also the fact that she flips that kind of stereotypical gender role, and she's like, ugh, like she just like she can't stand that he's like already so emotional and everything. But I don't know, I love this movie for the fact that she is trying to find true love. She comes across many different kinds of stereotypical males, also comes across different females as well, and it's an interesting kind of way to look at dating and to try to find that twin flame or perfect person for you, because I don't think there is such a thing, and you kind of have to do trial and error. It's just her trial and error ends up in death a lot. So, and also the medieval, like, the medieval wedding in the middle was great too, because I have been to many of those, and let me tell you, like, you got it like to a T, where I'm like, yep, I can smell the incense. I still have like scars from helping out making a chainmail like wedding veil, which by the way are super heavy. And so I was like watching that going, yep, that's exactly how they are. They do exactly like that. And one of my questions for you though was, what was your decision-making process in wanting to have kind of like that Renaissance festival feel? I mean, it's not a festival, but like a medieval kind of wedding vow ceremony in the movie. Because I thought that was an interesting thing to put in there.
I don't remember exactly why, what was, it was so long ago. But what I do remember was that little speeches they have in their heads, where she's talking about how much she loves him, and he's talking about how he can't really love someone, I think it was the very first thing I came up with. And so I wanted the whole thing to be centered around a fake wedding. And so the decision to make it Renaissance and medieval, I think, was just because they're witches, and that's the kind of ceremony they would have, So, but
I love the dialogue as well. That dialogue, that was going on, was so like, I was just like, it was really like, I guess it hit like concrete in the sense that I was like, wow, that happens so often, and a lot of I know so many people that have been in that situation, and just hearing it was just like, it flashbacks, like it just being with someone who's emotionally unavailable, or just doesn't, or not, that having that fantasy that just never ends up eventuating or staying. We over fantasize and kind of put all these expectations on what we want, and not being able to meet them and that confusion and like feeling you're left with.
Yeah, I mean, he was very emotionally unavailable. So it's like the other men were too emotionally available, and then he's emotionally unavailable. So it's kind of like that. You can't get it just like Goldilocks. You can't quite find the right person. But yeah, that was just because I was just thinking about, and that came out of actually watching, this Carl Dreyer movie that nobody's seen. It's called Gertrude, and it's from the 1960s, and it's not a very, really like Dreyer. His most famous movies were like Vampire and Passion of Joan of Arc, but most people have never seen Gertrude. It really bombed when it came out, and everybody thought it was horrible. But I really love it, and I was watching it while I was writing this movie, and it really is about this woman, and she can't find the right. Like her husband is bad, and she has a lover who's awful, and then she's got this other man who's in love with her, and there's all these men around her, and none of them can properly love her because she's got this kind of idealistic version of love that's like true love, where the man, like her husband's just always busy with work, and her lover is very narcissistic, and he's too young, and then there's a man puts her on a pedestal, and he's so like weird about her, and she's just kind of suffering through the whole thing with all these men are never quite right for her. And this was actually like the main first thing that I was thinking. It's like, and there's this amazing scene in the middle of Gertrude where there's like this, I don't know, I think her husband's a poet, and there's this poetry contest, and there's this scene where he's being awarded some kind of an award for poetry. And it's this like 10-minute scene in the middle of the movie where there's this poetry that's being read about love, about what does love mean, and like he's like this greatest poet in the country, and his specialty is talking about love, and he's like, but he can't love her. And I was just thinking that was really a beautiful film and beautiful scene. I guess the Renaissance scene was sort of came out of that.
Yeah. It's crazy. And there's a lot of like little things without this film that I also like felt kind of like a little bit sad as well, because there's a lot of moments where Elaine is saying things that I'm just like, oh, why? What? Really, like, no, girl, no. Like, it doesn't have to be that way,
Right. I mean, how many of us have like laid on our like the circular pentagram rug yelling, love me, love me? I think I've done that since high school. I've been doing that. I still do that. I think I did that last week. I remember looking up love potions when I was like in elementary school. Thinking, I just need the right one. I just need the I've been living Love Witch for a while now before the movie came out. And then when the movie came out, I'm like, oh, this is my movie. I mean, I haven't murdered anyone, but I would say
yet, Bonnie, you haven't yet.
I'm so pleased to hear that, because I did so much research to make this a movie that would speak really to real witches and not just be like a fake, like Hollywood like fake witch thing, and just to really like get inside of what it is to be a witch. And I know some witches, that I went to some rituals, and I just read all the books and just got kind of inside it. And there isn't that much of it left in the movie. I had like all these witchcraft scenes of rituals and all these scenes between the witches that all got cut. So there's just very little traces of it left, but hopefully it's kind of.
And you also got the witch side hustle thing in there, which no one ever does in movies, but us witches, we have to like pay rent. So the fact that she went to her witch supply store to sell things, like I have one right where I live. It's called the Green Man in North Hollywood that I go to all the time. And I'm always like, it's literally I could roll out of my bed into the store. I'm so close by it. And I remember during COVID, I'm like, I wonder how much they give me if I make like hex bags and like love potion bags and security and immunity bags. Because I used to do that to pay off bills when I was in college and a little bit after that. Because when I lived in San Francisco, everybody had a witch supply dealer. It wasn't necessarily drugs; it was actual witch supply dealers. So it's the fact that you have that in this movie makes me feel like it's much more authentic to modern day witches than most people realize. Unless you're in that culture, in that subset, you probably don't realize. Before Etsy, a lot of us had to like sell stuff.
Praise Etsy. Praise Etsy,
I I know friends who like sell witch items, and yeah, so
Yeah, so thank you for adding that for extra legitimacy to all of us watching.
I mean, there's so many layers to this movie. I haven't, I watched it when it first came out, and it was one of my instantly. I was like, oh my god, I love this movie. I love the aesthetic. I love all the different layers, And as I was watching it again now, after I've had more of my education, I'm a graduate student now, and I've studied a lot of feminist stuff and everything. Like the layers of the different like stereotypes and gender roles, and all the different like layers of feminism in it were just like. I don't know. I think I caught on to so much more of it today, and I actually just watched it a couple hours ago. And again, I found it so much more funny this time than I think I did last time. But it was like revisiting like a good old friend, and like the dialogue that you have, there's so many lines in there that I was just like, oh, that's so good. Oh my God, I love that line. And I just like when she's like, men are like children. I'm sorry, I have all my little I write while I'm watching it, and then also because I study psychology, like all like throughout it, like I think I haven't watched it in so long. So whenever I haven't watched the movie in so long, I feel like I forget half of it, And then I watched it today, and I was just like, oh my God, like through all of it, I was like, oh, I'm seeing so many elements of narcissism and of like borderline personality disorder. And then I forgot at the end that the cop is like, that's borderline.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the diagnoses I actually have worked with through my work in mental health care. And so it was I don't know, there's just so much to this film, and I'm going to fangirl for a minute and just say like, thank you for making this film, because it is just amazing on so many different levels. There's so many good lines. I actually watched it with a guy today who found it very interesting as well, which I thought was, I was like, I don't know if you're going to like this movie. And he watched it and he loved it. So, but
well,
there's
you just showed the trailer just now at the beginning, and I hadn't seen the trailer for years, and I haven't watched the movie for years, but I actually found it really funny too. The trailer, I forgot how funny it was. I mean, I think I was a little more serious when I was making it. I was taking it kind of seriously, but I knew it was funny, but I wasn't. I think it's funny. Maybe it's funnier now, just also because times have changed a little bit since the movie was made. It could be that as well. That movies are very, so many movies are so serious, like new movies have gotten more serious. Is that, maybe part of it? Is that
yeah, and it had the screwball like romance, like almost like a 1930s kind of bringing up baby, but also meets the color and the costuming and the set design and of a Hammer film or a Russ Meyer film or something where you're like, Faster Pussycat meets screwball comedy romance meets witches meets Hammer. Like there's so many, and also I think it's kind of like art, and I'm sure you've come across this as a filmmaker, that so many of us are projecting our own loves of certain things onto your film where you're like, yeah, that's not really what I was going for, but I'm glad you liked it. Like just
that's totally accurate, because the movies that I watch the most are all those like 30s and 40s movies. I mean, that's mainly what I watch, and so that's obviously going into it. And then having it look like the 60s and 70s is my way of trying to update it to the present. So to me, that's like the present. That's like the latest I can possibly go without it getting ugly, without it getting into like.
You also use real film. You also use actual film, which I think a lot of people, unless they really look into the making of this film, don't realize, since everyone's gone digital and everyone relies on digital so much. You use actual film, and you can tell. Like, I'm sure everyone at Kodak loves you because the film stock alone makes the film even better and sets it apart.
Lighting too, yeah, because there are a lot of movies that are shot on film, and you can't tell they're shot on film because they use such high definition like film, and they don't use a lot of light, and it's kind of like ends up looking a little bit like digital. There's some movies where you can't tell they're shot on film. Like if you shoot on film and you use like a ton of light, that's what brings out all that kind of color where it ends up looking like Technicolor. You have to flood it with light, because if you don't flood something with light, like if you shoot red and you don't light it, like it comes out gray. I mean, any color comes out gray if you don't light it. So whether it's film or digital, it's gonna look kind of like, you can't get the red back in post, because you'd have to paint it on, and people, you know what I'm saying? It's like you don't put the enough light there to get the colors to pop. That's it. So a lot of it's lighting. That's
And it does have like an overall feminine, like ethereal vibe to it. Because of the way you've shot it, it just has this warmness.
Yeah. It's really, really hard to get a DP to give you that much light. They usually like really hate it. They hate doing it. So I worked with a guy that really knows how to like for those kind of old style Technicolor type of movies, and so he knew what to do. I mean, so that was great. And then those old movies, they had a light on everything. You know, like now they have like a big softbox for the whole room, but they used to have like 8 lights on each person, like especially the hairmen. Like we did that. It's called like the clock system. Like you have a key light and a fill light, but you also have a hair light, an eye light, you have a clothes light, and everything's like flagged off so the shadows are beautiful. And it's not just, it doesn't end up too bright. It's like painting with light. It's like you paint in the light and then you paint in the shadow. And then like every painting has its own light. Every chair, every couch, every table has its own light, and it's like these multiple lights, and they're all with all these flags, and it's like completely an art. And then the thing is though that you have to have a really good cinematographer, because if you want to switch the angle, all that has to move. So it's like you know what I mean. And so unless they know how to do it really fast, you're dead because you're not getting your shot. So it's kind of like you have to be super organized, and then the actors have to be really like hitting their marks exactly, because if they don't hit their marks, they don't hit the light, because the light is like right there. They have to get their light perfect, and that's where you get glamour lighting. You know, like so the main actress, she's lit always with glamour lighting every single shot. Like there isn't a single shot where she isn't lit with glamour, and that's partly what makes her look so beautiful all the time.
Yeah, that's one of it. I think I read a autobiography or biography of Betty Davis, and Joan Crawford ironically did this too. And it's a different era of filmmaking, but they said if you ever want to look great, be really nice to the lighting guys.
Yeah.
Also, if you want to look bad, be rude to the lighting guys.
Yeah.
But they also like
Marlena Dietrich would actually direct when she wasn't working with von Sternberg. She used to direct the lighting.
Yeah.
So she would work with the gaffers and tell them, yeah.
And makeup Max Factor started as makeup for lighting for movies before it was ever over the counter. So, and certain wigs were also made just for filmmaking. So like if you go and look at the films, which is why I love your film so much, because you can tell that you're not just a good writer and a good, like you have a good style, a good eye. You understand the history of filmmaking. So you've actually applied that to modern filmmaking, which people don't realize. When you kind of learn from the 30s and 40s and 50s of filmmaking, when you look at Hitchcock, not just for the drama, not just for how he shoots things, but how things look and how the actresses look and their makeup looks, the clothing, everything. That's why I was like, this movie, even though everyone's probably going to tell you what they think your influence is, and you have your own influences, you know, Hitchcock came to mind a lot when I was watching this, but also the oversaturated colors. It's not oversaturated. This is how the like TV episodes of the Monkees used to look this color.
Yeah.
So I was like, I know
they used to love color. They used to love color. No, you're completely right. I was really looking at those Hitchcock color films, like from the late 50s and 60s. I was really looking at The Birds and Vertigo and movies like that, and you know, using that rear projection, which was really fun. You know.
Yeah, the prism projection. I think that reminded me of the Monkees, the movie Head.
Yeah.
And also like you know, just how the close-ups are close and the style of the backgrounds. Like even though it's a modern film, it looks like it was snatched right out of the 60s, but you have modern things in it still. So it's not like it's set back in time. It's just you're taken on a journey of what her life is like and where it's. And also where you picked to film was gorgeous, and the house was gorgeous. So it's just so many great eye candy moments. That's why I love this movie. I could watch it over and over and over and appreciate it on so many different levels, and that's good filmmaking. So thank you.
Yeah, I just really love. I just love, you know, the glamour photography, and you know, and in those days they would make everything look glamorous. Like a chair was glamorous, like an ashtray was glamorous. You know. Everything.
Yeah, I think I read a quote, I think, where you said something about, you know, like men watch this, when they look at this film, they're looking at, you know, the beauty of women, and you were trying to think about what women would be looking at, and it was interior design, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I was like,
that was like a feminist kind of concept to take. It's like, what's so interesting is that there is some nudity in the film with Elaine, but you know, all the pictures that are all over the internet where people are constantly copying Elaine, they very rarely is there anything with her nudity. It's almost always with her dresses that are long, with long sleeves and high neck, and she's completely covered up. So the idea is like, you know, you have a woman that has some nudity, and the nudity is not as interesting as the dresses. Like what women like is the dresses and the jewelry and the makeup and the decor. And so when men look at it, they're often like really into like her nudity, but there isn't that much of it. So they get disappointed. You know, it's like,
yeah.
There's just as much male nudity too, which I appreciate that you kind of equaled it, if not more. I think actually there's more male nudity than female nudity.
I always want to do, if you're going to do female nudity, I always feel like you have to have the same amount of male nudity. I was just like, keep it equal. That's why I had one male witch and one female witch in the coven who did full nudity every time. I just like asked them to volunteer. I was like, okay, who wants to be fully nude like the whole time? And like, me. It's like, okay.
Oh, go ahead, Renee. I'm sorry.
I loved it. It was awesome as well how you know, also carried on that kind of the traditional masculinity roles, like from earlier, you know, that those kind of films that came out. But then I think that's what adds to the hilarity of it, is when you're in those scenes with all the emotional things, and you've got these very traditional masculine characters that you just don't expect to, you know, bust out into tears and just be like, oh, Elaine, you know. And I love that. It's just something.
I mean, you know, I think like in life, a lot of men are traditionally masculine once you start dating them. I mean, they don't seem to be like that if you don't know them really well, but once like you get involved with them, they get very traditional. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of scary, like very you know, they want their woman to fulfill a role for them, and it's weird. Yeah. That's what's the weird. I think that's the weirdest thing about dating, is how that happens over time. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And like the scenes, you know, with Elaine, like, you know, wanting to cook him dinner, and like, you know, she's making this big steak, which she clearly, it's, you know, what she imagines he wants, you know, and she's just trying to do everything right to hit those little, like, I guess, gender, you know, stereotypes, those little checklists. And even the most, I guess, progressive male, even I would agree in the same point that at some point they fall into this traditional kind of masculine mindset of like wanting to be taken care of, like whether that's like, I guess, like a mother thing or just what they've seen as they've grown up. It becomes this kind of thing. And I feel like it does raise its head, even in the most, you know, non-traditional guys still have this little part of them.
Yeah, because they've got a woman, and what is a woman? You know, what is a woman? A woman is like someone who takes care of you, who has your children, who cooks for you, who cleans for you, who's your servant. I mean, it's sort of like we don't like to admit that this is what we sign on to.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely like. I hate admitting it. But I love looking after guys and like pampering and stuff. I'm a mummy character to everyone I meet in my life, regardless of gender. So like, and I definitely, parts of me are very much that traditional as well. And you know, and
women too.
There's nothing wrong or shameful about that, and I don't think women should be shamed for that at all. And like,
no, that's what I loved about the way you presented it. Yeah, like,
I mean, we can kind of Elaine, or a lot of people get actually angry about Elaine because of what she does, but it's like, it isn't like that isn't just kind of happening all over, everywhere. I mean, and it is actually really nice to take care of another person. You know, like a lot of people don't ever think about taking care of another person. You know, that's actually a wonderful quality that a lot of women have. You know,
cooking dinner is also, you know, and I'm bi, so I've done that for women as well, not just men. So it's like I find out what their favorite meal is, or their favorite thing to do or whatever. And I think it's that nurturing part of you in any relationship, regardless of gender, that can happen.
Yeah, and I love like sometimes in that bi kind of way to like have a woman take care of me sometimes. You know, sort of like be like that that everything, you know, that everything that a woman can be. Like I have that fantasy too, you know, sort of like a woman to pamper me, you know, in the way that women do, you know.
I mean, it's almost that it buys into that the witch goddess, like, you know, Earth. The whole lot of it is women are very nurturing. We're very, you know, we're kind of this overarching power that I feel like it's something you can only get from women.
Yeah.
No, I don't think I've ever gardened in the nude. And I love that scene where she's like naked, walking around in the garden, picking out flowers and things. Just because I know I'm going to get stung and I don't want to get stung in the worst possible way.
Yeah, exactly.
So I usually wear clothes, but I love that part of because gardening is very much a big part of witchcraft, is growing your own herbs, growing your own.
Yeah.
So I love that was in the film and that she's like Mother Earth, naked Gaia kind of character as she's gathering these things. Full makeup, full hair, full fall, all of that, but naked in the garden. I can
relate to that, Bonnie. I can relate to that. I don't even go across the road to the shop without makeup on. I am horrendous like that. So I'm totally with Elaine on that. I do not go out of the house without my makeup on, without my hair. I'm there with Dolly Parton, you know, how she talks about and she wears her makeup in case there's a fire and she has to leave. That's totes me. Like I'm like my brows on, like come on. Like
I love it when I go out and I see women who are just like full like I was company friend to the hospital a few months ago, and there was a woman, it was like 5 a.m, and there was a woman who was a patient there, and she had like full false eyelashes on at 5 a.m. I was like, that's great.
Yeah, that was me. I went to hospital last year and I had like my full eyeliner on, the whole thing, and I was like, I know that they're gonna ask me to take it off, but I don't care. Like it's like sitting in the waiting room in my little gown, like with full eyeliner and everything on, just like like loved it. But another thing I wanted to touch on, I think Jenna mentioned a little bit on the, you know, the contradictory kind of ideas and all these layers, you know, that are within the film. And I love the kind of, you know, there's this real polarity between, like, you know, we're looking at like the male gaze, and not only the male gaze, but one of the films don't often even go into this, but we're talking about the female gaze, and you know, and looking at almost that kind of, there is a kind of toxicity in both, obviously, and I think, but we just don't hear about it or see it much when we're looking, you know, into films, and no one really wants to. I feel like, you know, a lot of feminist, you know, writers and directors don't want to kind of go down those paths. They want to stick very much to, you know, their kind of, whether it be liberal feminism, or they want to really stick to this route, and they don't want to, there's no flexibility or anything within that view. And I think you really topped on that really well, where you're able to show that there is flexibility within that scope.
And there's femininity. Like, I love that, just like the robust femininity throughout this, but then there's also so much of these, like, you know, feminist comments and these like feminist undertones throughout it. And then there's also, like, you know, like when I was watching it, I was like, oh my goodness, this is also kind of like an opposite representation of, like, you know, how guys get when the girl gets clingy and she's like, smoking a cigarette, like, fuck this, you know? And so I was just thinking, like, so there's just so many layers and there's so many good lines, and I'm going to gush if I keep talking. So I'm going to.
Can I say I love the all pink tea room? That was more Barbie than Barbie. That you actually predates Barbie. Like, it was better than Barbie, the movie. That one scene in the tea room. And I know did it take place in the old the Hearst building in LA, I think, is where it was shot. Where was that?
It was. We brought in all the pink.
I loved it.
It's just like a marble. It's just a marble lobby of an office building. We brought in all the pink. Yeah.
Yeah, your set design, because this is another thing I don't know if a lot of people realize. You're not just a filmmaker as a director and a screenwriter. And yes, of course you know acting. Of course you know all that. But you made this You were doing
all the
costuming and set design. You're doing like all the heavy lifting.
I did. I sewed all those costumes for the Renaissance Fair.
Amazing.
I made Elaine's word. I mean, like, So
what was the most challenging of that response?
It was really the Renaissance Fair, just because it was so labor intensive. Because the costumes are all lined and they all had like, it's like, okay, over tunic, under tunic, cape, hose, codpiece, and it started like a hat just for one outfit. And it was just like,
wow.
And I had to make all the patterns because I couldn't find patterns for that period. So it was just like, and I'm not really that, adept at costuming. And so it was a learning curve too. So it was just really, and then there's like the trim. I went to a couple designer friends and I begged them to do it, and they just laughed at me because of how much work it was. They're like, no,
Next time you make friends with a lot of drag queens who can sew, because I'm going to tell you right now, or cosplayers.
Oh my God. My friend Barry, who does drag, I ran out of time in the end, and I didn't have time to make the Jester's little puppet. And I just like begged him because we were already filming. We hadn't filmed that scene yet. He made the little puppet for me.
Aww. And the paintings too are great. And I assume you did.
Oh, the paintings are amazing.
Yeah. And then he did some of the paintings for me too. So I did most of the paintings, but Barry did some of. Yeah, he helped me a lot. So I do have one friend like that. He's the friend who taught me how to crochet. His grandma taught him, and he taught me. But yeah, it's you're right. I need more. I need like a whole group of drag costume friends.
Well, you also did similar set design costuming as far as like color and just makes the eye pop and makes you really watch in your previous movie Viva, which is also a labor of love in some respect because you did a lot of the heavy lifting on that as well.
I did even more work for that, because I was because that was a lower budget and I had fewer people to help. Yeah.
And it's also one of those like 1960s romp sex kind of films that I love watching, which is like the woman who just wants to find a good orgasm, but also everyone she comes across is crazy. Like Viva's a great film. So all of you watching this, you should definitely watch that as well as Love Witch.
Yeah, that one did take place in the early 70s. That was in 1972, the height of the Playboy sexual revolution. So
and it's based on Playboy comics, right? Or Playboy.
Yeah, there's a lot of it that's taken directly, like exactly just lifted. So that was the cartoons and the ads in Playboy. I just like tore them out in the magazines and just lay them on the floor, and then just made a plot out of them, like a nonsensical plot, and then just kind of added my own experiences and ideas that I had about things. And I tried to just make it really silly. But it ends up actually kind of being sad in the end. Like the ending is sad, but it's just weird, because there's just like scenes, like the scene with the boss chasing the secretary and the madam and the girls, and I'm just like copying the costumes and the sets and everything. And all the
a bit more positive message, but also, be careful what you wish for kind of in romance, which I love that theme in Love Witch as well, which and also the women in it. I don't know if you want to talk about that, if you want to talk about Trish or any other the women, the female characters.
I loved Trish. I was in this
great. Yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, Trish at the table. I was like, I'm Trish. I'm sitting there thinking I am Trish. Like I can just see myself there going like, girl, what? Like just if I was actually talking to someone and they were saying the things that Elaine was saying, I would be mortified. I know I would. I'd just be like horrified that was actually, that was real. And I loved it. She's like, have you been brainwashed by the patriarchy? And I was just like, that's the best. I was like, that would be me. I would just be like, wow, when did you join a cult? Like, right?
I've noticed that recently there are people online who are like making little videos and stuff about Trish, and I'm so glad because for a long time there, everybody was like all into Elaine, but now people are more getting into Trish, which I love because I love Trish. I think she's a great character.
Yeah, well, I feel like Elaine is the fantasy. She's like the fairy tale. I mean, I would love to look as gorgeous as she does. You know what I mean? But it was like. But at the same time, I feel like Trish is the reality. You know what I mean? Like especially modern day women, right? So I everyone wants to be Elaine, but like majority of people are really Trish.
Yeah, more people are really Trish. It's true. That's like that's what people. Yeah, it's like the realistic version and then the fantasy version.
Yeah,
well, I don't know until she gets kind of single white female with the
at the end.
I feel like that's to be Elaine. But that's like a moment of grief. She's in grief because her husband, or she couldn't hold her husband because she didn't go the route of Elaine and try to be like a sex kitten, and so she's like in deep grief, and she's like, oh yeah, now that is the way. She was right. You do have to do that in order to keep your man. She was all like, it's kind of sad in a way, right?
It is sad, and I think that's one of the things I love about this movie so much is that like it's funny at times, it's like creepy at times. It's the aesthetic and the way that it's shot and the look that you develop specifically for this film is just so iconic, you know. And then there's all the amazing like witchcraft elements. I love the tarot cards that you chose for everything. I was like, oh, I know what that card means. Oh, I know that card throughout it. You know, like you have the drawings that she did, and like in the drawings on one of them, I noticed this time when I was watching it that there's like her ex-husband, and you drew the Two of Swords on top of that picture of them. And I was like, oh, I know the meaning of that card as well. And I found it just really interesting the way that you like wove in these, like, I mean, the Three of Swords is such a devastating card to get, you know? And then you've got the Tower in there. And like, since I read tarot, I'm not an expert or anything, but like, I really loved that. Like they said earlier, like the authenticity of what you lent to the role of the Love Witch. But like I said, there's just so many like funny like comments. Like I love the whole mental health thing. Like that's what I kind of want to ask you too, is like how all of a sudden there's like talk of like mental disorders, and you know, and I'm just kind of like, wow, I wonder how she kind of decided to throw in that element of it all, because you know, throughout it as I was watching it, I was kind of, and I want to watch it again now because I want to go through and diagnose everybody.
Well,
but I was just wondering like, how you came up with like, and it may be kind of a silly question. I don't know. I'm not good at interviewing directors, but
but you are.
How you came up with that? Because at the end, you know, and he's just like, what you call love is borderline personality disorder, you know, and she's like, you're a narcissist, you can't love, and I was just like, and I was like, this is reflective of many women I know and like their relationships. But I just wonder, like, it just seemed kind of a little bit quirky and kind of out there that all of a sudden there was like these mental health diagnoses just kind of thrown in. And so I wondered if you could talk about that part for just a second.
Yeah, well, I did a lot of research on different types of psychology when I was writing this, and I decided that Elaine was borderline, and that was like part of the source of her problems, that we wouldn't find it out till, you know, we would slowly find it out. And I just thought that Griff is the character who's like the realist, and he's like, I guess Griff and Trish are the realists, and Griff is the realist who can see through her, and he can see, and in a way he almost like loves her more because he sees who she really is, and he wants to help her, and he wants to bring things down to reality, but she doesn't want to live in reality. So he's telling her, he's accusing her of that, and it's his way of making it real. And you know, it's like if she wasn't, you know what I'm saying, she could listen to him, or maybe if he wasn't such a narcissist, which he is, he could listen to her. Like they could have some sort of empathy for one another and like listen to each other, but they can't because they each have their problem. But I just thought it's like he's bringing her, he's kind of trying to bring her into reality, and then she tries to bring him into reality, and then that becomes this, like suddenly all the fantasy. I just thought I'd like, it all comes crashing down. And in a way, like, it's really the first love relationship we see in the movie, because in real relationships, eventually it has to get real. It has to, it's, you get, you know, the sex, it's like the excitement of the sex and excitement of the first romance and all that. When that wears off, then you have to like get to know the other person. Let's get real. Let's talk about how the fact that you did all this crazy shit and you're acting like a crazy person, like a borderline person, like you're not, like something isn't right. Like you did these things, and let's talk about it. That isn't necessarily him like condemning her. It's him trying to know her And then I think
well, he shows, like, even though he's got sort of narcissistic in that scene, like after that sort of scene when they're all like, you know, like all attacking her for being a witch, he's got a real empathy for her, and he's, you know, he does understand that, like, she's stuck in a certain place, and, you know, he wants to help her, and you feel that. And even there's the scene, I really felt that the borderline in the scene where she's like laying on the bed and reliving all of these moments where people have, like, you know, degraded her or said she wasn't thin enough, and, you know, and all these sorts of things. But at the same time, she's also getting some kind of sexual gratification at the same time. And I that is, as someone who actually does have borderline, that was like, whoa, shit, like, trigger, like, not in a bad way. Not in a bad way, but like, whoa, I'm so seen right now. And I felt like there's this real, like,
people romanticize their own trauma. Like, this happens a lot. Yeah, and I do too. I've done it too. Yeah, when something is so ugly that you need to relive it as fantasy, which is kind of what the whole movie is in a way, right? It's kind of like
100%. And it's like, you can tell that there's all of this, you know, all of this trauma and bad experience underneath Elaine, and then this fantasy layer and this exterior is her trying to, I guess, find a way to deal with it all, and try and correct the situation by thinking she can do that by herself, whereas maybe she picked the wrong guys. Maybe these guys are really shit, you know, like, but she's trying within herself to fix something.
She's trying, but she also is, like, to blame as well.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing, is like, there's two things. She knows that and does it like it's one and the same.
Well, and after kind of watching it now, I'm thinking, my brain's like spinning right now. And with what Renee just said about, you know, the flashbacks, thinking about the trauma and stuff, it actually causes me to, like, kind of wonder, like, obviously, you know, you've written her as she has borderline, but when people are often subjected to years and years of narcissistic abuse, it can present as borderline personality disorder when it's actually complex post-traumatic stress disorder, because there's a lot of overlap between those.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so I don't know, that just kind of popped in my head right now, and I just
they're so related. They're almost kind of the same thing. I mean,
yes,
it's like there's no way of having borderline without having the PTSD, I think.
Yeah, and also I've just been recently diagnosed as an elder goth with ADHD, which comes with rejection sensitivity dysmorphia, which is a thing that, you know, I didn't even know I had, where it's like, you know, the littlest criticism or the littlest slight, I think my default is I think everyone hates me at all times. So I just spend my whole life trying to prove my friendship, prove my worth, which, you know, can sometimes be reflected in making a steak dinner on a first date, or, you know, having sex way too early, or showing the best possible me and not the realistic me. And so when I was watching this, you know, a lot of that movie, a lot of those feelings kind of bounced off the movie onto me, where I felt, oh, I get this, I understand this. But also I do understand Trish too. So it's like this back and Elaine and Trish. But I've had plenty of narcissistic relationships where a lot of this stuff in the film does ring true, and this does happen, and you do find yourself kind of looking back on your mistakes and looking back on, did I really, you know, deal with that well, or am I such a control freak that, you know, I'm hoping witchcraft can help me out here. But to be honest, you know, the real pillars of witchcraft, especially if you're going to do any dark magic, it's going to come back on you. So you better be careful how you use your magic, because it is a reflection, but it is an energy source that you don't want to mess with for your own selfish desires. So you kind of, you know, for me, witchcraft is more like something to enhance the situation or heal or make people feel better, make me feel better, have more of a connection with nature. It's not like, oh, I'm going to make that dude fall in love with me, because you don't necessarily want that, because be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
It's every, like, witch, it's like every witch magic, like, trope is like, you know, is you make them love you and then you can't get rid of them and they're annoying as hell. Like, and, you know, it's always just like never the way you want it to be. So
like another movie, like Practical Magic, which I love that movie, and it is an odd choice of a witchcraft movie,
it's
because
cheesy as hell, but I put my hand up. I'm a watcher.
And also that does talk about very toxic relationships, and be careful how you use your energy. But also, it is about sisterhood in a way, and it is which is interesting, because, you know, in this movie, it's not quite sisterhoody. It's more like Elaine is out for love, but it's not quite like her and Trish are not, joined at the, at the elbows.
Well, actually, she ruins Trisha's life.
Yeah.
She's horrible. She's horrible. I love that second tea room scene where she's such a bitch to her, and it's so scary.
Yeah.
And then we find out that she's like, this woman's a sociopath. Look at how she's treating her friend. Look what she did to the husband. Look how pleased she is about it. Like, what's wrong with her?
Yeah, and I love that you showed that way because,
I'm sorry.
No, you're right. No, I was just going to say quickly, like, I love that you showed that change because I know personally I've been in that situation before where I've sat, where when women turn nasty and where it's the same, that kind of weird primal jealousy, get off my turf kind of thing that you don't want to show but comes out, in certain situations.
Yeah. I just thought it was consistent for her character to just be like, she's
100%.
living in a fantasy world where she never does anything wrong. So why would she change now? I mean, Trish is telling her about her grief. Her husband died. It was Elaine's fault. And Elaine is just like, yeah, this cake is really good. No, la la la, fantasy land. Like, reality doesn't exist. I'm in my cake world.
What were you going to say?
I'm sorry, that chocolate cake looked so good too. I was like, oh my goodness.
I know that's the problem. This movie, it really does make even this, and I'm not a huge steak eater, but that steak even looked good to me. So I was just like, I don't know what you're doing with the lighting that's not only making the people look good, the scenes, the sofa, the rug, the candles, but also the food. Like it was.
Yeah. I guess the food was lit. Must have been had some spotlight. Yeah. Yeah.
Was there anything in the movie that you wish you could have had time to put in the movie? But because, with all of creative endeavors, you have to cut things for time and budget. Was there anything that you had wished that you could have kept in Love Witch or added to Love Witch if money wasn't an issue or time wasn't an issue?
No, we shot everything we wanted, actually. But
cool.
what I did is I worked on the script for a really long time. So I cut out all the unnecessary things before we shot. And I was really careful about that because everything you shoot is money. So I was really trying to pare it down. And then after we shot it, it was too long. So I had to cut it a lot. Like I cut it absolutely to the bone. So it was
wait, does that mean there's a director's cut that could come?
No, I didn't say that. The longer, but there is if on the DVD and the Blu-ray, there's like the deleted scenes, and you could see there's a lot of them. I mean, those were things that were cut out of the. So if you imagine those being in the movie, that's where that stuff is. So like some of it is just like rituals were 3 times longer, and some of the scenes were just a lot longer, but had to cut it to the bone.
Someone asked in the comments, which I wanted to ask you as well, because I'm a huge Jane Mansfield fan, and someone mentioned in the comments about Anton LaVey. I'm not really an Anton LaVey fan, but I'm a huge Jane fan. But that whole period in time with that like scenario was always really fascinating to me. But one of the viewers wanted to know if that kind of vibe and the Anton LaVey, was that inspiration for the ritualistic type scenes and the character, the male character is kind of like the leader.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, some of that dialogue in that scene where there's the burlesque dancer and the male and the female witch are kind of giving this little lecture to the blonde girls, a lot of that's taken almost directly from Anton LaVey's book, The Satanic Witch. These ideas about how women have to enhance themselves, like that it creates a kind of a magical quality for women.
Yeah, he's an interesting cat too, because his whole thing was sex magic, and the Golden Dawn wasn't really that. They were more into ritualistic and historical witchcraft power, and he was way, 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 way into sex magic and really using more of the dark elements. And I think that's kind of why he factioned off into his own thing. And I remember like his house was the all black house in San Francisco. I think it's condos now. I don't think anyone in those condos knows it used to be his house, but he was such a huge, like almost polarizing part of witchcraft, because when you start studying witchcraft and the history of it, there's going to be factions like any other religion. But he is such an interesting guy, and the fact that you had your set colors based on his tarot deck designs.
Well, actually, that's
Thoth. It's
the
not
Thoth. That's the Crowley. Yeah,
It's
so there's some Crowley in influences.
Oh right, Crowley, yes.
Crowley, and then also so the first ritual, so some of the rituals were based on Alex and Maxine Sanders. There was one, and there was another that was based on Janet and Stuart Farrar's book.
Yeah.
And then she has her spell book, and one of the pages that she's just flipping through it randomly, and one of the pages it rests on that you can see is there's a quote: "Every man and every woman is a star." That's from Crowley.
Yeah.
No, it was, you did your research. In fact, the only thing I kind of was like hoping was the best cookie recipe I've ever come across in my life was in the Satanic Bible. And it's like a ritual cookie, and it's a cookie recipe. And I was just thinking, oh yeah, she's probably, there's a cake recipe somewhere, I'm sure, that she's gonna.
And also, Elaine's altar was in there are specifications for how to make a perfect altar in one of Crowley's books, and that book is exactly the altar from.
I love that. I mean, not to say everyone should go out with the Satanic Bible for the cookie recipe, but I am saying that, you did your research, because I could tell, even like in the tiniest detail, you took your time to really look at the history of witchcraft, but also look at modern witchcraft and look at, every single book that we probably checked out of the library in the 80s and 90s as, goths. That was reflected in this film. And
because I read all those books. I really did. It was so much fun.
I even had the Time Life books on witchcraft that were just like the little encyclopedia set of witchcraft with visuals. Which this predates Wikipedia, for those of you watching that don't know what it is. I could tell. I was like, wait a minute. I think I saw that in the Time Life book of witchcraft and the occult and the paranormal Bible. And yeah, it's such a love letter to not only that style of filmmaking, but witch lore and witch lore in pop culture. Because there's also references to things, and I don't know, maybe I'm projecting, but there was a great after-school special movie once where this girl basically has her friend live with them, and she takes over the family and causes car wrecks, and she's a witch, and she's basically trying to seduce her dad away from her mom, and all these.
Something about Poison Ivy with Drew Barrymore. It could be.
A couple of people have mentioned that to me before, that episode, but I haven't seen it.
Oh, it's good. It's like an after school special, which is something that would be like on TV, like a TV movie. And I think it's on Tubi or Freevee or something. I'll put it in the comments in case everyone, and I'll tweet it at you as well, Anna, so you have it.
Okay,
but we all have our own like our favorite witchy movies, or our favorite, elements that you have in this movie. And again, it could be just viewer projection, where I'm like, yeah, that reminds me of a Hammer film, or that reminds me of a Giallo film, or that reminds me.
Well, I'm a huge fan of Hammer films.
I love the early Hammer films. I'm obsessed with them, and the women, and they're also stunning. Like, oh my God, I have like Pinterest boards just for the women of Hammer films, and I just save all of their looks and their hair, and oh my God, and all the outfits. I get obsessed. There's not enough of that in horror these days.
So great. And then there's also this Russian movie D that was from the same period.
Yeah. Incredible.
Yeah, and so Elaine was a little bit modeled after her as well. Just that kind of icy cold beauty that the cold.
And I mean, there's also a witchy episode of The Monkees where Davy Jones falls for a very witchy girl. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. Like,
because we're like in the mainstream and lots of TV and stuff. That was fun.
Mm. Yeah. Well, the two blonde girls that were, in that scene, like the first thing I thought was like Lips of Blood. And I was like, is this sort of a reference to that or no? But I love that film.
I haven't seen that.
Oh my gosh, you would love it. It's
just based on some kind of like blonde twins that I knew in school, actually.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's a Gene Rowland.
What's amazing is those actresses didn't know they're not sisters,
Yeah. No, they're not. No, yeah.
Yeah, that was just casting. I just found two girls who looked the same.
Which is like the girls in The Shining. They're not twins. And it's like the two girls, it reminded me of, because that's it felt like a Shining reference, but also like a witchy Sweet Valley High. kind of reference as well. So I was just like, oh yeah.
I love that you just said that. I still have all of my Sweet Valley High books from my childhood.
When you have twin blondes like that, you're gonna think other things. I mean, here's the thing. Like I said, you have so much richness in your movie that I think people can watch it over and over and over and over and find new references and find new things that they're like, oh my God, I didn't even notice this before. This is so like rich with pop culture and movie and history references, and it's so good that like every time I watch it, first of all, I never wear blue eyeshadow, and I'm only doing this for you. But when I saw the movie, the fact that she did not put out a Love Witch makeup palette, do you know you probably could retire on that alone? Just because so many of us.
Also, I was just noticing so many people have made so many products from the Love Witch, and that I don't get money for any of that. Like I'm not like they're not like people just sell Love Witch stuff.
I was gonna say I've seen like whole collections of Love Witch.
They sell all kinds of things, like whatever they sell, and I just think. Yeah, support, artists on Etsy who want to make stuff like Elaine, don't bother them, they can just do it, I guess. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know what to do. I just don't want to, But if they're going to be profiting off my movie, they should at least buy my book. That's all I've said to say.
Yes, and speaking of your book, I wanted to mention this as well because I love the like kind of, I don't know which, exactly where you drew your book from, but I kind of what I knowledge of it. So I wanted to drop on this because your new book.
Did you finish reading it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And I
haven't had a chance. I'm a full-time graduate student, but I will as soon as I possibly can.
I think I need to read it again, but but I knew
a lot of similarities to the Love Witch, which a lot of people aren't seeing.
Yeah, yes, definitely. Yeah, and there was like
did you read it, Bonnie, too?
Yeah, I did. I got like I'm a book author as well, so I write a lot of books. So I always try to buy books of the people that I like love and appreciate and admire, because as we know, the publishing industry is just kind of a shit show right now. And I don't want my favorite authors and favorite creative people to give up. So even though I don't have a lot of money to spare, I will spare it on artists and people who I appreciate to keep them going. Just because I mean, thank you for writing it, first of all, and thank you for continuing to make movies and being creative, especially as a woman in the industry, in the horror industry, in the film industry. I'm glad that you exist and you're still doing the fight, but also the publishing industry, which remarkably, that's still a place where you can make your mark, but it's still so cutthroat, and it can be very.
It's tougher. There's so much more competition,
Yeah,
there's a lot. I love that you took something that's like very male and like 18th century. Like I know Blackbeards Castle, obviously from Bela Bartok, like in the opera. Yeah. So and I was like, when I looked it up, I was like, after I knew that you were bringing the book out, I was like, is it? And then of course I read that it was kind of a reimagining from kind of a feminist view of that kind of fable and story. And I mean, the original, like the opera that, I know obviously is very like, it's pretty cool and pretty dark, it's like, having, I guess, a wealthy man, and then, he gets married, and then after he marries her, he goes away, leaves his wife and leaves the keys to all the doors in the house, but essentially says don't open them. But like when she disobeys him and finds obviously that in every behind every locked door there's bodies of his former wives, and I'm like, oh. And then I read that you were originally looking at this for a screenplay, and I was like, but you chose to do a book, and I'm like, can you do a book and a film, please? Because like I feel like it would be such
I had a really hard time getting the film off the ground. So, and then the pandemic hit, and I was getting closer to getting it made, and then everything shut down. And then my partner said, "Why don't you just write a novel?" It was a great idea. So then I did that during the pandemic. So, and now I'm working on another movie that is in pre-production, but it's a different script because it's a simpler script to do. The Blackbeard script was actually a bit too expensive and involved. It was hard to get it produced, and so I thought, well, maybe I'll do the book first. But the book is struggling a bit, so everybody needs to buy. Everybody needs to buy the book You know,
Yeah, I was looking at the reviews and things, and I was like, it seems like
very mixed. Yeah.
Yeah, very mixed, and some people really get it, and then other people are just like, this is just not at all, like just not.
Well, they
And
don't understand. I think the people who dislike it, I think they would like it if they knew that I was working, like you say, that the leverages and layers. If they understood the layers, because I think, like, here's the thing about the leverage too. When it first came out, a lot of people didn't know what to think about it. It took a couple of years actually to catch on, because it was, people love the visuals, but they didn't know what to make of what it meant of the story. Because very hard, like all these women who have like latched onto it since, they weren't in the beginning. People just didn't know what it meant. They just didn't know. But just culturally, like slowly, people started to like relate it to something in their lives, and they started to understand it, and so it became like it invented its own niche for itself in culture that wasn't there before. And you were talking about the female gaze. I believe I'm the first person who was talking about the female gaze, because in my director's statement I talked about it, and I had interviews and about it, and nobody was talking about anything like a female gaze before then. And I was explaining it very clearly. What I'm talking about is women looking at other women on the screen. It's not a male gaze. When I'm looking at a woman on the screen, a glamorous woman, I'm not like looking at it like with a male gaze, trying to, I don't want to possess that woman. I want to be that woman. Like we're talking, how we want to be Elaine. And I think that is something like feminism, you know, we need to like understand it better, like what it is to watch a movie when we're women. Like there wasn't really the language around, like we can watch a movie as women and we can identify with the woman in the movie, and that we can love her, and it's in a beautiful feminine woman on the screen that we're loving is not like us being masochistic and us being asked to be like a man gazing at a woman sexually. It isn't that. Do you know?
Yeah.
And I knew that from watching movies from the time I was a baby and adoring the women, and that's mommy, and then you get older, that could be me.
And they almost felt like one-dimensional too. And like, you know, when you're looking from that kind of male gaze, they are very much one-dimensional. They're an exterior.
It's about the fear of the woman, and it's about, you know, it's about the woman as like this magical creature, but in a way that isn't about identifying with her or feeling inside of her, right? But I think this book is weird too, and it's weird in a way that I think it's an original book. It actually is, the ideas in it are weird, and they're weird enough that actually a lot of people aren't grasping them right away. And I think people do grasp them, like eventually they'll gain, the ideas in it will gain currency in culture, and then I think it'll become popular, like maybe even
there's so many like themes in the story that I feel like, and like you said, layers that are just they're so poignant and are actually so relevant now more than ever. And so I'm like, I hope that people
scary. It's scary. It's a scary book, though, right? It's scarier than The Witch because it deals with issues of consent in a way that's scary.
Consent and like you know, abusive relationships and why women stay in relationships.
And also the secrets that men keep. And also, like when I read it, there's a great movie called Elizabeth Harvest about this beautiful woman who's in her home, that her husband's very rich, very powerful. And she's not allowed to look in one of the rooms. All the other places she can go except for this one room. And I'm not going to spoil it. I'm not going to spoil it for anyone, but it's very similar.
Yeah, it's a Bluebeard story. Yeah, there are many Bluebeard stories that are like so that's what this is. It's another version. So that sounds like it's another version of Bluebeard.
Yeah,
there are spirals out there. But I think that the thing that's really weird about my book, which I didn't even realize until after I wrote it, is that romance novels these days have to have a happy ending. And it's not a romance novel, it's more like a horror novel, but it's written in some ways like a romance novel. Like parts of it at the beginning, it sweeps you in as if it's a romance novel, and then it turns into horror. And I think romance readers are not used to that, because even the darkest romance novels always have a happy ending. So the idea is like, it's dark, it gets darker.
If it's gothic romance, there's not, usually you end up as a ghost at the end. There's not a happy ending for those types of books.
Yeah, but that's like an obsolete genre. You know, the gothic romance is like from 150 years ago. So like that's what I'm doing. Like you were saying, it is like 18th or 19th century. Yeah. But it's also kind of like mid-century crime novels. and it's also kind of like some of those 70s like horror, TV, like in the hammer. It's just like it's like a lot of things that are retro. Again, it's the love which, but it's not. It's what's interesting is that it hasn't been happening in books in the same way. So when people are writing historical fiction, or they're writing historical romance, they're not writing this way. Because I scoured, I looked and I looked and I looked. I couldn't find a single book that was a Bluebeard type of book that doesn't have a happy ending. I couldn't find a single.
I love that. I love it when movies. I love it when like books don't have a happy ending. Like those are actually my favorite things. So now I'm very excited to watch this.
Yeah,
I love how the
Fables
didn't
comic,
have
the
a happy
Fables
ending
comic.
either.
The Fables comic also covers Bluebeard. I don't know if you read Fables, but they also have a Bluebeard story. That's not a happy ending whatsoever, but that's also, retelling through comics, which is a bit different than fiction, but still that I mean, if people really dig deep and look at those Bluebeard stories, they're horrifying, and they are so like still very modern in the sense of the horror it presents and the scariness and the idea of toxic relationship and toxic, not the equal power, power relationship where someone's definitely the dominant and someone's definitely the one that's in control. Those are horrifying stories. So I'm really glad that you decided that that's something you wanted to latch onto and do a retelling of.
Yeah.
Ability.
It's kind of like the anti 50 Shades of Grey in a way.
It is.
You know what I mean? Because it's kind of like Christian Grey, like it seems like he's a Bluebeard, but then you're like, oh, he's not. He turns out to be like a wonderful husband and a father. I only read the first book, but
well, there's some PTSD, there's some abuse issues. Here's the thing. I'm not going to get too much into it, but like the bondage scene's very different than what that book presents. But also that book is a lot about trauma and a lot about coming out of trauma, but also going into things for the wrong reason and maybe not seeing people for what they really are until it's,
Yeah, and my book is like that too, but I think it has a more realistic.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because like my book is kind of like a Christian Grey type of man, and yet he remains consistent to what that type usually is. He doesn't like suddenly.
Yeah, he doesn't falter and become this. That he doesn't become a fantasy man and then like let's get married and live happily ever after type scenario.
Yeah, because a man like that isn't like going to change really, So like
no, you can't change men, can't change them girls. Like
it's kind of like what you were saying, Jenna, about the psychology coming in at the end. I really like to do that. Like I really like to bring in like psychology and realism in after the fantasy. And a lot of people are not even finishing this book. They're reading like half of it and they're just throwing it in the trash. Because they think it's just going to end up like that I'm romanticizing the abuse. You have to read till the end to understand that I'm not doing that. You have to read all the way to the end,
Oh, I can't wait to read this.
Yeah, and you're talking about like you know on the outset it seems like it looks like it could be a romantic book, and then it's like no, but you're talking about pleasure and pain, and then you are also coming at it from. I haven't seen anybody else address the Bluebeard kind of story from really a female point of view.
Well, actually, Jane Eyre does.
Well, she's Jane Eyre, of course, but I feel like.
But that's considered a Bluebeard story. Like Rochester is considered.
Yeah.
And then he's got that wife locked in the attic.
Attic. Yeah, you're right. I guess so. Yeah.
So and then the precursor to that, Wide Sargasso Sea, which is a fictionalized telling of the woman in the attic and what was her story and how did she even get there. It's very much Bluebird. Oh my gosh, Twitter.
He's very Bluebeard. Rochester is even more Bluebeard in that one.
Yeah.
And I guess I just feel like your voice is really strong. I think that's probably what it is I feel like your voice is very strong in this book. Whereas I feel like it's
a lot of people don't trust. I think people are not trusting me as a writer. I think that's a lot of what's happening. They're like,
they will.
I think they will. I think this book will eventually be understood. I mean, it's going to take a couple of years. I really do think that because it's the same thing that's happened with all of my work. Like people are like, really uneasy about it for like about a year or two, and they're like not sure what to do with it. And they're not sure if it's good or bad. I've gotten reviews on Goodreads that say more than one review, which says like, I'm not sure if this is the best book I've ever read or the worst book I've ever read. And I think they don't know whether they trust me as a writer. They don't know whether they trust me as a writer to have been putting all the nuance in there on purpose, or whether they as the reader are the ones that injected it there. You know, they don't know with them just like really stupid and crazy. You know what I'm saying? Or whether like,
It's a book.
or not, you know?
Having
So
such polarizing opinions could be good too, you know. Like I feel like because the views of it are so polarizing, like people remember the work when people
That's
can't.
what I was gonna say.
You know, when people can't decide whether it's amazing or bad or what's going on, what's happening. Like people remember those kind of works. And I mean, I think that's still a good thing because it's showing that it's really making people's minds go, hang on a minute.
I'm also thinking like some of the what's really interesting about some of the negative comments is they're all blaming the woman for what happens to her. And I'm thinking, you know what, we're in this stage right now with domestic abuse, like where rape was 20, 30 years ago, where women used to be raped and like, well, she was asking for it. What did she do? What was she wearing? Was she out late at night? Did she talk to a strange man? They're doing that about the domestic abuse because that has not been addressed. So people are like, well, Judith could have done this. She was so stupid. Why did she stay? And it's like, wow, they're blaming her. It's like, do you blame someone like when you're mugged or your house is robbed? Do you blame the person? Like, well, maybe you should have like gotten a better lock on your door. Like maybe you shouldn't have ever, maybe you shouldn't have kept, maybe you shouldn't have had money in your house. You know what I mean? It's weird.
Yeah.
It's like if you got hit by a car
when they're the recipient of a crime. Are you?
And I think there's still a lot of guilt and shame and like around, I think, a domestic abuse from not just males but females.
Oh, women are the ones that are getting
the ones who are like attackers. Yeah, because they don't want to address it.
It's because they believe fairy tales. It's because every narrative they read, the woman is so strong and tough and can get out of any situation. But do you know, like femicide is extremely common, and domestic abuse is extremely common, and these women aren't stupid. That's not why they're in this situation. They're not. It's not because they're stupid.
No, I mean it can happen to any of us, and a lot of it is like that stereotypical or fairy tale paradigm of, he hates everyone but loves me, and I'm the one that can change him, and he's good most of the time. He's just bad this time, but he always apologizes. Like I never ever blame anyone, whether they're male, female, non-binary, whatever, that you're in a relationship that's toxic. Anyone can fall into that. It doesn't matter if you're strong. Anyone.
People are getting really angry with the book because they're saying, because they're thinking like, that would never happen to me. The reason it happened to her is she's stupid, and it would never happen. Because I'm thinking some of these people who are like condemning her and calling her stupid, like maybe one day they'll meet a bluebird, and then they'll suddenly understand the book. Like they'll go, oh, that's what that book was about. These women that it happened to, they love the book. Like I've had 2 women already, 3 women actually. They left their abusive man after reading the book.
It's so good.
Awesome.
So good.
Well, I think you're just ahead of the discourse. Like you're ahead of the pack.
That's what it is. The domestic abuse discourse is not happening in novels. And
I think people are afraid to broach that subject in a lot of ways not because of cancel culture, but because of, sadly, people are looking at, okay, how am I going to write this? Why am I going to write this? How is it going to be perceived? I liked when I write books to just write books I want to read, not write. I mean, my agent's going to kill me for saying this out loud, but I don't write books to make them bestsellers. I write books because they don't exist and I want to read it. And I know there's other people like me that want to read these books. And I run the gamut of writing nonfiction that only a handful of people will want to read, like Crafting with Feminism. It got a lot of 1-star reviews from both feminists and Trump supporters. And I ended up taking it to Trump rallies and selling it because they thought it was a good book. And I'm like, joke's on you. So like I don't, for me, it's just, I'm going to read and purchase things that resonate with me, but also that are new and different. And I think keep doing what you're doing, because even though it may not get the, acclaim right off the top with like Book Talk and Book Twitter and Bookstagram and whatever, you're going to get that audience who are going to discover it. It's kind of like Love Witch. I think it's a cult classic now. So it may not have gotten all the
couple years. Yeah, it took a few years. And then
anytime I post anything on Love Witch, people go wild. And it's share, like, comment, share. And if they haven't seen it, they're like, what is this? Where can I find it?
Yeah,
Well,
and
I feel a little ahead of the pack, man, because I saw it right when it came out, and I was instantly like, "This is amazing! This is
exactly.
magical."
I was watching the lead up.
That movie got me laid. Thank you. That was a date movie. Do you know how many dates I took to your movie and got laid? Thank you very much, because it really helped with my mojo.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing.
I was watching the whole before it came out. I'd been watching all the everything that was happening before it actually came out. So I was hardcore, just waiting for it to come out. So I was I think, but there's this whole other generation now that are now just only experience it and seeing it. And
That's true. It's a younger generation.
That's going to happen.
Exactly.
That's exactly what's going to happen.
I think so, because I think the book is really similar to the Love Witch in so many ways. I mean, you both read it. Do you know what I mean?
Oh,
yeah. I feel like there's good.
A lot of the books I've read too that have taken a while to get a fandom, like even Anne Rice books weren't necessarily popular right out of the gate, and it took the 90s really to get the goths on board with those books. And then also when you're ahead of the curve, you have to be aware that there's going to be some catching up, and you have to wait for everyone to sort of catch up. You don't have to wait as far as creating stuff. You can keep going forward, which you're doing, and you're doing an awesome job of it. But sometimes it just takes a long time to get your audience to be like, holy shit. And then it gets this resurgence. And then you find out all these and I see it with different generations. Now Gen Z and Gen Alpha are suddenly getting into goth culture and 90s goth culture, and Anne Rice, and also Chelsea Quinn Yarbrough books, and also the movie The Hunger is now.
Yeah.
They're just catching up, right? Not even seriously on Friday just passed, a really young Gen Z person told me how cool it is that I have Sick Tribal from the early 90s, and I'm like, whoa, shit, going all the way around. But I think they are. It's coming. It totally is coming back in.
Yeah. So, and if you're ahead of the curve, you're already there. So it's you're already breaking new ground. You're already iconic in what you've done. When I talk about when we talk about the movie Love Witch, so many people were excited that we were talking to you on our podcast. I can't even tell you, my dentist mentioned you, and he's just a normal dude. He's a normal dude that I didn't even know he knew what Love Witch was, and he's like, it's such a pretty movie. I'm like, I know. And it was just one of those movies that people are iconically catching on to and not let go of it. It's become on so many top 10 lists, so many lists of I would never not want to have this stranded on an island with. You're kind of making all these top 10 lists, and so the more you make these movies and books and art and comics and whatever you want to do next. And I would love a Love Witch game. I'm just saying, if you ever want gaming, and I feel that would be a fun either tabletop VR or video game or mobile game. I'm your girl. I'll buy it. You have got this
or a tarot deck. I'm get a tarot deck. That's
I know. Different merchandising things, because I'm trying to get another movie made.
Yeah. So thank you for thinking outside of what everyone expects, because I think that's important in filmmaking, but also women filmmakers, and I think women filmmakers do this better than anyone. And I'm so glad that you not only exist, but you're continuing to do other movies, other books.
I'm trying to do another movie. I'm hoping I can get it made. It's really hard. It's really hard to get a movie made, to get it, because I did my other movies out of not in the studio system. I'm trying to do that's why it's been so hard. I'm trying to do something more within the studio system. It's been difficult.
Where's A24 right now, guys? Come on.
All right. We love them. I don't know what else to say right now. I'm just very glad that you came on this show. I'm so excited to see what else you have going on. And now I have to read this book, even if I neglect my grad study work right now. I'm I have to read this.
Tell your friends to read the book, because because the more people that read the book, if the book catches on, then there's a chance they could get it made into a movie. Right?
Yeah, and I do
really happy.
Yeah. And also I do a book club show with the actress Felicia Day. So I'll have it be my pick next time I have a pick for a book, which will be probably a month after next, I'll have you be my book pick, and you can get a lot more people reading it and having commentary.
I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, because it's a good book, and it's an interesting book, and I think that a lot of people should check it out because, like you said, if it gets a lot of buzz, that can maybe end up being a movie or TV series or something cool that we can also buy and enjoy.
I'm gonna drop a link in for everyone watching as well, just to the book and where you can find it. Because because it's cool. I mean, it's on Penguin Random House, and I'm down with Penguin. I've got to say, I used to work in publishing for like 15 years.
They just hired me, so I'm a development editor with them now. So they
Yay!
Really? Yeah, no, it's actually initially Verso books, and
Verso was first, right?
And then in US, it's Penguin.
Yeah. Yay, Penguin.
Kind of back to the questions really quick, but was writing a novel very different for you than wriing a movie? Like,
I loved writing a novel. It was so much better than writing a screenplay, because screenplays, it's all about everything has to be so short. Everything has to be so truncated because it's just like a blueprint. It's not the final thing. But with a novel, it's like the words are the final thing, and you can just luxuriate in words. You can just write. You can just write as much as you want. You can make scenes as long as you want, and you can have people say as much as you want them to say, and you can describe things as much as you want. It's just felt.
You're tied to a budget. It
was like decadent. It felt decadent. I could describe things I could never afford.
That's awesome. Well, I love your voice.
It's really huge without expanding the budget.
Well, by the way, I'm down if you ever want to write like a prequel series of Love Witch, like what was Love Witch? What was she like as a teenager, and what was her first love like? And like, I feel like this. I mean, not to like put any added pressure on you to create, but I would love a Love Witch series of books as well. Just saying, hint, hint.
That's Bonnie's sales pitch. She does it every time we have a guest.
Yeah. That would probably sell better. That right? Yeah, that would. I think that was cool.
I'm just greedy. Once I find something I like, I then try to convince the creator to make more of it because I'm greedy.
Yes. Yes. I mean, your work so far that I've seen has just been so not just iconic, but just so different than the other stuff that's being put out. And I think it really stands out. So like, I'm so stoked to read this book, and I hope it does get turned into a movie because I cannot wait to see like your vision of it all. Yeah. I'm just like, I'm enamored with like your perspective, your voice. Like I said before, like some of the lines in this movie, just like, I mean, they made me laugh. They made me be like, fuck yes. They had all of the emotions. And I think that that's one of the things that makes your work so brilliant is that there is like I already said, like so many layers. There's so many different emotions that you feel throughout this. I'm sad for Elaine, but I'm also like love the like dark ending, and she's all delusionally fantasizing about everything, and I love the humor. I love the feminist aspects. And I think that you have this really unique ability to mesh all that together into this artistic representation that is unlike any other director I've ever seen. It's really unique. It's really creative, and just keep going, please.
Thank you. I'm going to try. I'm trying.
Well, the ending for me, like I felt sad, but it was kind of like that. It kind of was what you kind of would expect. You see all this hard work that Elaine's putting in all the way through to be something else, to get what she wants. And then in the end, she ends up alone and with nothing. And it kind of like, I feel like what happened, what happened to Elaine after that? Did she see, or is she still in that fantasy world, like?
Well, she did have a psychotic break. So
yeah. Oh,
yeah.
She did.
Yeah. And that's what I mean.
Yeah. I don't know if she ever comes out of it, or maybe it's like the end of Psycho with Norman.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah. That's kind of the feel, because it's like, you get there and she gets to that point. And you're like,
I think she goes to prison for a very short time because of the way the guards kind of fall in love with her, and then she relocates and she starts to cause more harm. That's what I think.
Yeah, I mean, if Norman Bates can be released and go back to the hotel and Psycho 2, 3, 4,
surely Elaine can. Yeah,
I think she moves to England. And I think
and that would make. I feel like that would be perfect.
Yeah, I think she moves to England, and I think Wayne's brother and Trish and a bunch of people come after her to try to find her.
Ooh.
Killer.
Random question, but how did you select Eureka as the town to shoot this in? I thought that was a very interesting.
Or was it Arcata?
Yeah, Eureka and Arcata. My partner lived there when he was after college with his girlfriend, and said, that's a very witchy up there, and there's a lot of Victorian architecture. You might want to check it out. And he was right. So
yeah, it's outside of Humboldt. It reminded me. I did a brief stint. I lived in San Francisco for like 22 years, but I took 1 year off to date someone in Santa Cruz Mountains. But it was like in Boulder Creek. So it was up by like Felton and Scotts Valley, where it's very mountain, but it's also very forest witchy up there. There's a lot of Stevie Nicks clones up there doing their cool witchy thing. Let me tell you, I did not run out of witch supply stores up in that area of the Santa Cruz Mountains. So watching this movie, the architecture and of course the forest and the redwoods, and I do love that you have a line in there at the very beginning where she said San Francisco was getting a little too weird for her. Because that is something, if you know your serial killer history, your Manson history, Charlie Manson left San Francisco, the Haight-Ashbury era, because it was getting too weird for him. And that's why he was in the ranch in LA. And I kept thinking, oh my God, was that a reference? Did you accidentally make that reference? Or was it one of those things where you're like, well, San Francisco gets too weird for you. You know that maybe there might be something wrong with you. And I love that she went into this like remote area. It wasn't necessarily a forest, but she does mention the redwoods. She does mention the trees. She does mention the air is different and the energy is different. And it had a very good like Santa Cruz type vibe to it as well, as far as the witchiness and going to a burlesque bar and going to a witch supply store and having a lunch on a picnic bench and then seeing like a horny professor, which is very Santa Cruz. So
yeah. The professor gave me such I was like, seriously, when I watched it, just like before the show, he was just giving me, I was just like, seriously, my skin was crawling. I was just like imagining this guy. I was just like, ew, like get away from me, guy. But like, I love that about it because that
actor's really good. I met this woman recently at a book signing, and she said she went to a party at his house, and she's like, he's exactly like the character.
I mean,
I love how he said about the when she puts the thing in the drink, and he's like, "Wow!" Like he's just so
like that's actually like there's a
character. He was good,
in
Santa Cruz, they're really into like, especially at UC Santa Cruz, but also Aptos, which is more of a community college for hippies. And I took classes there in like gardening, which is just growing pot, but what I loved is that there was a huge mycology association. So there's a lot of people that go foraging for hallucinogens. And that guy looks like the professor that's in charge of that in Santa Cruz.
Oh,
so
really?
he perfectly, like the costuming, the face, the way he talked was totally on point.
It was really fun to cast this because certain people just have exactly the right vibe, So.
Yeah, I feel like he's like a character in like so many films. Like he's that character that you just.
But even the top that pulls her over is very Dragnet / Chips. So I definitely like the very beginning.
You know what he did before he was an actor? He was a model for romance novel covers. Like the guys without the shirt,
Mills and Boone style.
Oh,
That's a job, man. That's a cool job.
I mean, it's also a job that's got to go to your head, kind of like that. Was it that Sandra Bullock movie where she's an author and Tatum Channing is like the guy that?
Oh yeah, is her
like Lost Vacation or something. It's kind of like Romancing the Stone remake in a way, but like he thinks he is an action star, even though he is just the model. He is not someone that is actioning, and you don't find out until Brad Pitt shows up being the action guy in the movie. But I've met male models that do romance book covers because they go to romance book festivals and they sign things. They all think they're pop. So they all sign things, but they're in costume. It's like they're cosplaying the actual cover that they're the model for, but they're normal dudes. But sometimes it goes to their head, which is kind of fun to watch that amount of like psychosis happening. So I love that was, not to say you're actors like that, but I love that that's a little tidbit about his background because he was so great playing like kind of the hot cop that we all have like sort of a fantasy about every once in a while of the hot cop. Nothing really comes of it, but at the point we're at the very, very beginning. But it's one of those things.
And speaking of casting, was Samantha your absolute first choice? Was it instantly just like, Samantha, you are like the one for this role?
No.
Okay.
No, because she didn't give a stellar audition. Her
Interesting.
first audition, but then she gave a really good second audition, and then I had lunch with her, and it was during the lunch when I realized she was perfect. I just needed to like talk to her. It was more like talking to her and getting to know her a little bit, where I realized she was absolutely perfect.
And it's such a breakout role for her because I can't imagine anybody else playing that role.
Yeah, she was perfect. Yeah, because she had this quality that nobody else had. She had this cold, icy quality that was so interesting because everybody else was like trying to be sexy.
Yeah.
She wasn't trying to be sexy. She was sexy. Do you know?
Yeah. She was like comfortable in her own skin and very much built like a
very imperious. Yeah, very cold and imperious. And I just thought that's what I'm looking for. I didn't know I was looking for that until I saw it. And then I was like, that's it. But she was being kind of a people pleaser during the audition, so I didn't see that side of her. So then she was being all like ingratiating, like how actors are, and just trying to please us and being all sweet and smiling a lot. So I didn't see it until like she was kind of like cold, like during the lunch, like she was very self-possessed. And I was fascinated with it. It was fascinating.
Well, sometimes that's how actresses get the role, is you see how they are when they're not on all caps on.
Yeah, just who she was so fascinating to me.
Yeah. No, she's amazing. I mean, your whole cast is amazing. The actress that plays Trish is amazing. The men in this movie are great.
Yeah, I think she thought it was a joke on her first audition. She was making fun of it, and that's why her first. She was like overacting or something. You know.
Yeah.
I couldn't see it yet. Yeah.
And then got one
rehearsals, and she became more herself. You know, during rehearsals. Yeah.
I was gonna say, I've got one last, I think, question that I wanted to ask you. I know that this film like has gotten like so much like feminist praise and also feminist backlash on the whole spectrum, really. And I guess I wanted to ask you, like, how was that like when it came out, like being on the receiving end of both sides of that kind of coin? I think
all my work has had that response since I started making work, like way before I started making feature films, like when I was making plays and short movies and little skits. I've always had this extremely hot, passionate response for and against everything I do. That's very, very scary, actually, because there's a lot of anger and hatred, and there's a lot of love, and it's all really strong. And this happening now with my book, and it's always like a bit tough because I thought maybe that part of the response was over. Like, you know, people are just going to like what I do now.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, the book is getting that same kind of like raw love and hate, very strong on both sides. Like, again, like it's just some people, this is the best book I've read for a decade. This is the best, you know, this is the best book I've ever read. This is the best, this is the perfect book, perfect feminist book. Other people saying, you know, whoever said this was feminist should be fired.
But I think that's what good art does, though. I think
whatever, you know, and there's one review that says this is Anna Biller's written the first great feminist novel of the 21st century. Another person says this is feminist for babies, feminism for babies, you know.
But I think that's what good art does. I think good art causes people to have strong responses, whether it's negative or positive. And I think if you aren't creating that sort of strong emotion in people when they're viewing or enjoying your work, or, you know, then what are you doing? You know?
Yeah, and I'm not trying to create like a feminist book. I'm trying to create a book about a character and her.
Yeah. The problem is, though, as female creators, that's going to be attached to everything we do because we're female. And that's whether or not we want it. And I mean, I asked for it by writing a book called Crafting with Feminism. So some of my 1-star reviews were like, this is a, you know, I set back feminism 30 years.
Oh, God, yeah.
Because I had vagina ornaments for your.
I mean, hey, Bonnie, I'm a former adult film star. Do you know how?
Really?
Right?
Wow. I know, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah, I guess I knew that. I forgot. That's so cool.
I get a lot of like, oh, you're not a feminist. You did porn and like,
Right. There's a lot of really strong emotions around that, right?
Oh yeah, but for me, it was an awesome, empowering experience. So.
Yeah, some of the biggest feminists are in adult entertainment or sex positive, like Annie Sprinkle, to me is a feminist icon. And Lydia Lunch did an adult film, and Lydia Lunch is an icon. To me, like it just depends too on your way if you're in. A lot of
sex workers and former sex workers really relate to my work, and I think that I did some. It wasn't really. I didn't consider it at the time as sex work, but I realize that maybe it was. So I had some some job like that when I was younger, and I really think that really has informed my work in such a strong way that I think that is partly where I'm coming from. Is just this kind of like being inside of something and being out. Like this split. Those kinds of splits between like your feminine, like your performance as a woman, your essence as a woman. Like all of those things that are in that are warring with each other, and that you're consciously playing with, and everything that people have done sex work, or people who have thought of themselves in terms of like they have a sort of like you know what I'm saying, the inner and the outer, like the performance is more of a conscious thing. Let's say the performance of femininity is a conscious thing that's used as a tool or as a weapon or even as just consciously. Women who have done that in their work are very receptive to my work, and I think because of
they understand. I think they understand where you're coming from too. But like, I was never in adult films, but I did some burlesque, and I did go-go dancing for a long time, and I was a cage dancer for a long time. And that is also a certain level where there's certain feminists that are like, you are not a feminist. And to me, feminism has so many different connotations, such a loaded term these days, that it can be overused to a sense of everyone has it for a different reason, and there's not one set definition. So I think sometimes it's dangerous to just attach that to a female creator, whether they're making movies, books, comics, games, whatever. Don't just say they're feminist because of this. Look at what they're presenting. Look at the stories they're telling. They're telling stories about being a woman or being, romantically, whatever. And witchcraft is also a very loaded term. So it's like, especially these days when America can be very twitchy about that. I mean, there was no witchcraft Super Bowl ad. I was waiting, but there was a Jesus ad. So it's like, and that's the thing. We live in a culture where sometimes it's looked at as a good thing. Sometimes people think witch is a bad thing, or feminist is a bad thing, or being a woman, or feeling you're a woman. I
think femininity in general is going through something weird right now. It's hard to be feminine right now, and to
even present
to present feminine without drawing a lot of anger.
Yeah.
I have a feminine character that I wrote. It's drawing a lot of anger. And I think it's drawing more anger because it's not like a physical, like an actress, which I think it's an actress who just looks a certain way. People are just like, well, that's how she looks. But when you're writing a feminine character and you're like writing her feminine fantasies, let's say, it's getting under people's skin. It's making them angry. I think that's the part of the book that's making people angry. It's like her consciousness of her construction of herself as a woman is actually, I think, is what making a lot of people really angry. And it's like, why? Like, why is that? What century are we living in? What's going on?
I mean, we go back and forth.
Throwback, really, isn't it? Like, I feel like
I've been asked questions in interviews, questions like, well, do you think that Elaine or Judith, the character in my book, do you think that they really want to look like that or cater to men like that? Is that really what they want? Is that their real fantasy, or are they just doing it to please them? I was like, are we really asking that question? Like, do people ask men if they really want to look how they look? I mean,
when you read the story of O, you're not like, you know what I mean? there's like certain stories and certain characters across sexually enticing literature or titillating literature where why aren't the guys being under the microscope as much as the women? And I think
why are women always told that they don't really know what they want?
Right.
Like why are women always told somebody else's desire is prior to their own?
Yeah, we don't know what we want. We don't. I love that.
We don't know how to look, how to dress, how to dress ourselves. Like women who wear no makeup are condemned. Women who wear lots of makeup are condemned. Women who do this. Any type of woman is just condemned just for any choice she makes whatsoever. And it's like, but the worst thing is like, do you really know what you're doing? Do you know? Is that what so I have this thing in the book, and
it's like you said with the stupidity again, like they're thinking that they're stupid.
There's this part of my book where Judith constructs herself as a woman, very consciously decides, and it's because she was raised as a boy, basically. And I think that's making people angry.
Interesting.
I think and they're not saying that's what's making people angry. But I feel like that just like her discussing how she went through that process.
Yeah.
I'm losing people. Like, and this is right near the very beginning, how much she loved being a woman, being feminine, how she chose it and she loved it, is already making people say, this is not feminist, this is trash, and like throw the book against the wall.
It's also weird that people are treating that when Barbie is a movie that like went off the rails. And by the way, when you watch Barbie, because I went into it like, oh, this made me feel good. There's some like really strong speeches of how exhausting it is to be a woman, being everything to everyone, to just exist is exhausting.
Yeah.
And I think because that movie at least had some really good poignant points about that. And there's patriarchy stuff and there whatever. And also it was crazy that like, the actor got the best nom and not the woman for the movie. That's like the point. That proves the movie right there. It's own existence. But like I do think that especially in this time right now that we're living, there's just so many people that are knee-jerk reacting to things, or they project their own insecurities or their own hatred or their own problematic stuff onto books and movies and whatnot. And they're not really seeing it for what the creator is trying to do. And I think that's a problem too in this society where we want instant gratification. We're not looking to learn. We're looking to be gratified, which sadly can affect book sales or critics or whatever, whether it comes from books or movies or whatever. So the fact that you are doing something that's hitting such a high note and low note, like people either hate it or love it, I love stuff like that because that means you're writing something that people like what Renee said earlier, people will remember that. I'd rather read stuff that pisses me off than stuff I forget 5 minutes after I read it. So at least you have something that's resonating on a level where people
there's all these books out now about female serial killers and things like female characters that are really, really gross and disgusting and really, really, really extreme violence, like women committing extreme violence against other women. Nobody has any problem with those books.
I know.
A woman who's feminine, who allows herself to be vulnerable for a minute, is like, nope.
Which is crazy to me, though, because the whole idea of feminism is that you can be whatever kind of woman you want to be.
Right.
Like, it doesn't have to be this strong, super independent or super, whatever woman. You can be that femme traditional wife if you want. You can be this romantic icon. And that's the whole thing. It's just allowing women to have the freedom to be who they want. And so that's really interesting to me that you have people being like, well, that's not feminist. And I'm like, well, yeah, actually it is. It is. She's, she's being the person she wants to be,
And it's reminiscent of lesbian culture too. Cause it's like, I am clearly a lipstick lesbian and I'm bisexual though. So I'm also into dudes and also non-binary and also trans and also, so I don't, you know what I mean? So I don't fit that mold of what people think. And in our own gay culture too, in the queer community, there's a lot of discourse on, well, you don't look like a lesbian or you don't act like a lesbian. And it's like, but I like lipstick. I like wearing makeup. I like being, and that doesn't make me not.
Yeah, there's a lot of like rigidity in how people are defined. This is a very rigid. Yeah.
Well, I feel like we're going back to like the 1960s, like, kind of, I guess like academic feminism is where I feel like we're going back to that, where it's very grounded in like, we're looking at the old school feminist doctrines and
Second
you know,
grade,
and it's sort of gone back to that again. And you know, where like I said, there's no flexibility, there's no outside of the lines. You know, when I remember when Love Witch came out, like there was a huge outcry as well about the, you know, the kind of domestic, you know, the domesticity of Elaine's character, and you know, just how man-serving she was, and all of that kind of stuff was very vocally anti Elaine. But I think the message was lost, you know, like the message was
Not that she
completely
had all the
lost.
power. I think people forget
She's just
that.
she's a retro femme fatale, which is a
Yeah.
lot of women do that and love it, and it gives
Exactly,
them a lot of
yeah.
power.
And
Yeah,
that's,
it wasn't
that's the
Stepford
one.
Wife. It wasn't like a Stepford Wife thing where she is
No.
like just a robot. Like she still has all the power. I think people, when you watch it a few more times, you're like, oh no, she's in charge of everything. She's not some docile.
Yeah, my character Judith is like thinks she's in charge as well. I mean, it's just that she's got a scarier type of man. She's not like, just submissive.
Exactly.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm literally going to get this book tonight now because now I'm so intrigued.
I'll resend it to you, Jenna.
Okay, thank you. Good, because like, oh, I've just been so bogged down with grad school readings that I just haven't had time to read for fun, you know. But now I'm like, I have to. I can't. Not.
Okay, that's fantastic. You know, it's getting a bit late. Should we?
Yeah, we should wrap it up. And I just want to
Bonnie, have me on your show, okay? I would love that.
Yeah, thanks for having us, and thank you also for just going on a deep dive with us about your about Love Witch, but also your creative process and the book that's come out. We really, really love having
Blackbeards Castle. Everyone, go and buy it. It's on Amazon. It's Barnes and Noble. It's everywhere. Go, go, go.
Thank you guys so much. It was so nice to meet you all and chat with you. I could do it forever, but
yeah,
we'll find you on social media. We'll keep it going on social, and I'll send you some goodies too from my witch supply.
Oh, thank you.
Love it. Well, is there anything else that you would like to promote, or any like links or anything you want to drop?
No, that's it. It's just buy my book if you can, and if you love it, leave a review somewhere. That would be lovely.
Yes, and watch The Love Witch, and watch Viva.
Okay.
Watch them all.
Thank you, Anna.
Guys,
again so much.
All right. Take care.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.